Hi friends, welcome to the NPTEL course Leadership for India Inc. Practical Concepts and Constructs. We are in week 4 covering competency leadership. In this lecture, we are going to cover leadership essentials. I am presenting a recap of leadership attributes which we considered in the earlier lecture. There are 10 developmental attributes of a leader. There are also 10 performance attributes of a leader. A leader to be effective and efficient needs to possess these 20 characteristics. Leaders play an important role in enhancing the performance of their organizations and also developing leadership potential in the aspirant leaders. A leader can bring out further the capabilities of the leadership team to the full extent through a synergistic combination of the capabilities and inputs of the leadership team. The 10 developmental leadership I proposed are trust, empathy, passion, courage, integrity, mentorship, empowerment, reflection, aspiration, and commitment. These are by and large qualitative factors, but significantly influence leadership effectiveness. We have 10 performance leadership attributes, which are knowledge, vision, strategy, execution, conceptual and analytical skills, decisiveness, communication, collaboration, and negotiation. I have also proposed that the leader's leader would need to have certain other additional capabilities to be able to lead a group of leaders. These apex leadership traits or skills are wisdom, stature, innovation, intuition, inspiration, nurturing, networking, ethics, objectivity, and socio-economic purpose. Together, these 30 constitute the apex leadership capability of an individual. Different types of organizations and different phases of businesses typically facilitate or require certain types of leadership. Leaders' leadership requires that the apex leader, who typically is the CEO or the SBU head, achieves a leadership strength that can promote growth or fight decline, as the case may be. The 10 developmental leadership attributes, the 10 performance leadership attributes, and the 10 apex leadership attributes are vital ingredients of an apex leader's performance. I will come back to these leadership traits again and again as we go through the leadership journey in this course. Let's look at the kind of pressures and the opportunities which a leader faces. A leader's personality is governed by the firm which he or she is managing, the industry in which the firm is located or situated, the national economy that envelops the entire industry as well as the firm, of course, and the global economy, which determines how national economies are ranked within a global committee of economies. That is the overall context, which we also discussed in an earlier lecture. These pressures, however, are not pressures in the real sense. These are also opportunities. These are also certain very important factorial inputs that influence leadership attributes and that also demand certain types of leadership attributes. To be able to get these attributes, we need to work on 4 important things, and these would be discussed at some length during this lecture. These 4 essentials are education, experience, instinct, and intuition. Some of these things happen through a formal educational process or formal social setting, but some are based on genetic or upbringing disposition. So let's first look at leader as an individual. A leader is not a superhuman being. While so much is defined in terms of the great capabilities of a leader and also the organizations they are destined to lead, leaders also stay invested in each other significantly, as many of us, many individuals are. Individuals think, express, and act characteristically and differently. Specific personality types, specific leadership styles, and specific competitive pressures bring out the variations. This individual behavior is true of ordinary individual in the society or a frontline executive or a middle-level manager in the organization, and is also true of a person who has occupied a leader's position. However, these variations are accentuated by the business context in each case, but the individual parameters do definitely constitute the core. What kind of individual variations can we think of? Is the leader having an assertive personality or a deliberative personality? Is he or she a task-oriented leader or a people-oriented leader? Are there heavy competitive growth pressures, or the firm is having a comfortable, safe zone of operation? We do not know when you enter a leadership zone which kind of combination of the firm and the individual would actually work out the best. However, leadership, like the rest of our destiny, is something which is ordained. We need to make the best out of the leadership opportunity, overcome all the challenges we have, and build value for the society and wealth for the company. So, whatever applies to an individual in terms of certain basic parameters of improving oneself also applies to the leader. However, when we study leadership, we keep a particular focus on the way these knowledge inputs and experiential inputs and our own predispositions are marshaled in the right manner so that we become effective leaders. That's why we undertake these kinds of courses. There are four essentials of leadership which constitute a core leadership framework. I would say that the leader's personality is shaped by four factors. The first is education, because that inculcates a learning mindset apart from providing knowledge. The second factor is experience. It builds versatility and resilience apart from adding to the knowledge which a person has. The third is instinct, that is a behavioral syndrome of the person, an intrinsic approach of the person towards all things, material as well as non-material, social or economic. That is the instinctive behavior of an individual, and therefore an instinctive behavior of a leader too. It calibrates risk and reward. Finally, the fourth one, intuition, which provides differentiation. Not everyone is equally intuitive. Some people are more intuitive than others. So these are the four factors which determine how a leader's personality is shaped. A framework of self-awareness about one's instinct and intuition, coupled with a framework of self-development based on education and experience, constitutes what a leader becomes in terms of the development attributes, in terms of the performance attributes, and in terms of the apex attributes that we discussed earlier. So the framework of education, experience, instinct, and intuition is essential for us to introspect ourselves as leaders and also make ourselves the most effective leaders as we go through the firm, industry, national, and global economy paradigm. What is education? We all know that education is a process which gives us knowledge as well as degrees. However, there are no set principles as to what is the right way of education. Is the formal education through schools, colleges, and universities the best way of formal education, or we could have the education through several other means as well? Education certainly provides functional knowledge, it provides functional depth. As a result of education, we can be specialists in one or more functions or domains. However, after education, as we gain experience, we are able to move into managerial and leadership positions because we also learn continuously in the workspace, in the workplace through experiential education. The more senior one grows in a hierarchy, the more important it becomes to grasp new things and develop oneself on the foundations of the past as well as the perspectives of the future. That is extremely important. We have examples of individuals who have not had a formal education, but they have contributed to development of startups, entrepreneurial ventures, and major industries themselves. We will cover some of these leaders here. Here is a list of 14 college dropouts from the global business scene. They became successful entrepreneurs. Bill Gates, who founded Microsoft along with Paul Allen. Michael Dell, the founder of Dell Inc., computer hardware. Richard Branson, who founded the Virgin Airlines and also diversified into several other areas. The iconic Steve Jobs, who founded Apple Inc. and also came back to take Apple to new heights in consumer electronics, computer hardware, and software. Walt Disney, who headed the Walt Disney Productions after founding it, a movie production house known for its classics in animation and other movies. Henry Ford, the founder of Ford Motor Company, automobile manufacturing. He rewrote the standard automobile production as a paradigm. Milton Hershey, the chocolate manufacturer. Larry Ellison, Oracle founder. Coco Chanel, cosmetics and fashion accessories channel. Mark Zuckerberg, the famous Facebook founder, digital social media. Travis, who founded the path-breaking mobility concept through Uber ride-sharing application. Jan Koum, WhatsApp, again another revolution in digital social media. John Mackey, Whole Foods groceries taken over by Amazon, given the value it brings. Evan Williams, Twitter, another social media platform characterized by brevity as a differentiation. These 14 leaders didn't have formal university education, yet they became entrepreneurs and created great firms and even created great industries. In India, too, we have several examples of college dropouts who became successful entrepreneurs. Tax Security, Oyo Rooms, Quick Heal, Free Charge, DirectT, Pesto, Chrome Pictures, Housing.com, Fusion Charts, Kayako, these are all founded by people, startup entrepreneurs who didn't have formal education, and they cover different types of industries, certainly not as varied as the global entrepreneurs without formal education, which we covered in the previous slide, but these are more based on service industry and also digital applications. That said, it doesn't mean that not having formal education is the ticket for getting into leadership positions. Just as having formal education is not an essential condition for becoming a leader. But we should recognize that as a guidance, as a principle, higher education certainly helps us in broadening our horizons and deepening our skills. It enables us to gain more from experience. Knowledge provides a framework, a learning system. High levels of education make for stature in certain entities. For example, in the universities, we need to have a PhD to be qualifying as an entrant to the academic circles. In certain domains, such as research, we need to have deep research experience, PhD qualifications, postdoctoral qualifications, and a track record of research in high technology academic research laboratories. These are essentials. But the main principle is that higher education provides us the foundation of knowledge, which is both in depth depending upon the specialization we choose, but also generic in terms of how to learn about new things. It provides a basis for understanding a spectrum of disciplines depending upon the broad specialization we choose, and then build on that as we get into the experience network. While at 20s or late 20s, we end our formal education experience. Once we enter the industry, our knowledge journey continues. Experience also teaches us a lot, and there could be several things we learn from the workplace machining, from workplace activities that probably the academic institution would not be able to teach, because academic institutions prepare us for a general knowledge approach, and we are prepared to enter any industry. It would be impossible for any academic institutions to simulate each and every industrial environment or business environment and have that as an integral part of the coursework. That is not possible. However, what academics teach us is to how to learn, how to research, how to consider various factors, how to understand the interlinkages, the distinction between liberal studies as well as the detailed hard technical studies. Therefore, beyond formal degrees, which of course are essential and necessary in today's milieu, education also provides theoretical knowledge and experimental perspectives. It also provides, very importantly, logic and rationality in us as leaders. Therefore, education as a process undoubtedly is a great enabler for an individual to acquire and sharpen certain faculties to be a more effective individual and therefore a more effective manager and a leader. What about experience? Experience is also a process. While education provides theoretical knowledge and also encourages experimental perspectives, experience lets us apply the knowledge to the practical situation. At times, experience also teaches that there are different ways beyond the knowledge we have acquired to be able to tackle the practical developments that happen. It overrides experimental perspectives with experiential learning as well. To be able to effective leaders, we need a twinned approach, both educated and experienced. And at times, when there are technological discontinuities or economic discontinuities, we need to also have formal education supplementing the experiential learning. Experience, therefore, is an important ongoing process as we go through our career journey. and the higher levels of experience and higher levels of grasp that are expected of higher levels of experience make us better managers and better leaders. There are enterprises, of course, without experience as well. Most startups, as we can see, are founded by young college graduates with very little experience or even no experience. So, where is the question of experience being a fundamental requirement for setting up an entrepreneurial firm or a firm? We can ask that question of ourselves. There is an interesting article in Harvard Business Review, which is cited below, published in 2018, which analyzed founders who had won TechCrunch awards over the last decade. And the average age of such entrepreneurs at the time of founding was just 31. That means they have had minimum experience but not maximum experience at the time of finding. For the people selected by Inc. magazine, one of the magazines devoted to startups and entrepreneurship, as the founders of the fastest growing startups in 2015, the average was 29, still younger than the 31. Paul Graham, a co-founder of Y Combinator, one of the entities involved in startup development, he quipped that the cutoff in investors' head, that is, investors who invest in startups, is 32 years of age. After 32, they believe that the founders would not have the entrepreneurial zeal and passion. Having prefaced the research with these observations, the authors also move on to examine whether these hypotheses are indeed true and whether there is any age-related alternative paradigm as far as leadership is concerned, whether in entrepreneurial companies or non-entrepreneurial companies. So, three aspects of HBR research are represented by me in this slide and the following slides. Basically, the founding age significantly differs based on the domain of operation. Expansion of digital and social media opportunities as entrepreneurial and startup opportunities has served to lower the age for enterprise establishment. Many research findings support this. Let's see the percentage of founders by age group. You can see that the highest is in 30 to 39 and 40 to 49 groups. 29 and younger, 50 to 59 are correspondingly lower, and 60 and older even lower. These averages, however, hide a large amount of variation across industry. In software startups, as per the research of these researchers, the average is 40, whereas younger founders are not uncommon. In certain fields which are very much technology oriented, deep technology oriented, such as oil and gas or biotechnology, the average age is closer to 47. The preeminent place of young founders in the popular imagination may therefore be reflective of disproportionate exposure to a handful of consumer-facing IT industries, such as social media, rather than equally consequential pursuits in heavy industry or business-to-business sectors. So you can go through further at your leisure, but the issue is that when you look at most successful firms, those are established by founders who are not necessarily very young. They are having sufficient experience for them to provide significant impact through the experiential learnings which they have learned as part of the experience. To be able to analyze the age factor further, both from relevance and rationality perspectives, we have to look at product innovations also, along with business scale-ups, to understand the impact of age and these two factors. So when the age is 20, the change in the likelihood of success is a particular level, let's say indexed to 20 years of age. The peak happens when the founder reaches the age of 55 years or so, and thereafter again it drops. The hypothesis by these authors, validated by their experience, suggests that if you were faced with two entrepreneurs and you knew nothing about them besides their age, probably you will be better off by selecting the older of the two rather than the younger of the two. Or this research leans more towards age being one of the factors of success in entrepreneurial organizations. While there are many factors that explain age advantage in entrepreneurship, the research also found that work experience does play a critical role. Relative to founders with no work experience, those with at least 3 years of prior work experience in the same narrow industry as their startup were 85% more likely to launch a highly successful startup. That keeps us the age of 30 as probably an appropriate age to start thinking of entrepreneurial ventures, and 40 to 50 is probably the golden period of establishing strong entrepreneurial ventures. We also have these great examples. Steve Jobs and Apple introduced the company's most profitable and landmark innovation, the iPhone, when Jobs was 52. Amazon. Jeff Bezos and Amazon had moved far beyond selling books online, and Amazon's future market cap growth rate was the highest when Bezos was at 45. For Google, Sergey Brin and Larry Page, the growth rates of their businesses in terms of revenue and market capitalization peaked when these founders became middle-aged. It is therefore necessary to appreciate importance of experience for which age is a surrogate. Extremely talented entrepreneurs may have an unusual acumen, allowing them to succeed when they were very young, yet still see greater success as they age. Thus, there is no fundamental tension or disparity between the existence of great young entrepreneurs and a general tendency for founders to reach their peak entrepreneurial potential later in life. Another research is that despite evidence to the contrary, venture capitalists persist in betting on young founders probably for two reasons. One, deal metrics and deal returns. The measurement of the success of entrepreneurship with the minimal experience is probably impacted somewhat curiously by the deal metrics and deal returns, because an youngster is in a hurry to start off his venture and his ability to negotiate a winsome agreement or contract is not very high. VCs like youngsters who are willing to make their bets on startup ventures. They also believe they have a long pathway to experiment and also succeed based on failures if it is required. Because younger entrepreneurs are better deal for investors than more experienced founders, in the literature that surrounds investment on entrepreneurial and startup concerns, there is a perception that experience has not that much of an impact in terms of entrepreneurial success. Having done this, we also need to explore what exactly explains the advantage of middle-aged founders. For example, is it due to greater access to financial resources, deeper social networks, the mental and emotional stability they possess, the knowledge and experience edge they have, or certain forms of all of these combinations? In the meantime, it appears that advancing age is a powerful feature, not a bug, for starting the most successful firms, as the research concludes. Beyond education and experience, we have two other factors which came up in the four-factor framework I proposed earlier. These are instinct and intuition. Education and experience teach us to understand a subject or a domain and also apply the knowledge and also gain new knowledge from the function and domain. It teaches us how to develop a product, how to offer a service, how to be differentiated in terms of science and technology or customer factors. Instinct and intuition are completely different aspects which are highly personal. We can say that they're partly genetic and partly dependent on our upbringing. Instinct is a person's natural tendency to behave in a unique way using the knowledge and ability he or she was born with rather than taught or acquired through training. A person is instinctively adventurous. A person is instinctively conservative. A person is instinctively ambitious. A person is instinctively pessimistic. There could be personality profiles which are based on instinct like this. Intuition is the ability to know something by one's feelings rather than through facts or evidence. I called it a self-illuminated drive to feel in a particular way. That is the intuition. Now, the drive comes from an instinctive or an intuitive way of thinking. The extra drive beyond knowledge and experience which a leader has comes from an instinctive or intuitive way of thinking, expressing and acting on the part of the leader, and these are based on instinct and intuition respectively. And as contrasted with both experience and education, intuition and instinct are fundamentally personal attributes. As an individual draws on the instinct more frequently than intuition, we characterize an individual more by instinct. But the intuitive capability of the leader is very subtle but very impactful. We can upregulate or downregulate instinct, but the ability to upregulate intuition is not very easy to acquire, and those leaders who are able to get that ability to upregulate intuition even further than what they have are really blessed leaders. So let's look at instinct. Instinct, we said, is part genetic. We tend to be highly energetic, we tend to be highly careful as we grow. These are inborn instincts, but they are also conditioned by our genetic factors, family factors, and friends factors equally, or in some cases family and friends influence more than the genetic factors. Couple of genetic factors which are important: being fearing or fearless, being greedy or sacrificing, being in the want of everything one comes across versus being sacrificing. These are all genetic characteristics. Even within siblings, one gives and one takes to a greater degree. And within the family, the dependence and independence nature of the family impacts the instincts. And friends, whether they have extraversion as their theme or introversion as their theme, and in which kind of friend circle you have grown, influences the instinct levels of an individual. So the instinct of an individual is aligned to the family and contrarian to the family occasionally, is influenced by friends or influential on friends. These leadership behaviors, which come from the childhood stage and through school and college phases, from early leadership to early quietness, are shaped by the instincts that take root in one's psyche. These play a part in how individuals respond to different challenging situations that arise in day-to-day or business lives. That's why it is also important for teachers in the classrooms and professors in the colleges and universities to bring up the leadership capability as much as possible. We should not be happy with just one class representative or one fine arts representative or one legislative representative from the class. We should see how all the participants in a classroom are able to uplift themselves in terms of the leadership characteristics, for which their ability to understand their instincts and work on them is also an important aspect of learning and an experiential learning too. Let's look at the instinctive behaviors. I said that instinctive behavior is influenced not merely by genetics but also by the family and friend situations. I propose here a very hypothetical illustration. Let's look at a parental role model. The parental role model could be rigid and conservative. It could be flexible and outgoing. That is, parents could be very cash conservative. Their value systems could be very traditional, and they would have very strict rules as to how people should govern themselves, and they also serve as role models in those aspects. On the other hand, certain parental models could be entirely flexible and outgoing, provided a lot of freedom, lot of empowerment, and also quite a deviation from what we think are accepted modes of behavior. When you have these kinds of rigid and conservative or flexible and outgoing parental models, we cannot conclude that children's instincts would automatically reflect those instincts. In fact, there could be contrarian as well. Children under a rigid and conservative parentage could be either rigid and conservative themselves or become flexible and outgoing. Similarly, a child who is brought up by parents who are very flexible and outgoing could either be flexible and outgoing by themselves or become rigid and conservative. A child who observes a parent who is extremely dictatorial, just as a hypothesis, would also feel that it is not such an appropriate way of modeling leadership. He may not learn leadership, but he still has it in mind that if I were to become an elder person, I should be much more conciliatory and much more soft, take into view others' points of expression as well. So those kinds of contrarian trends also could emerge. So children's instincts could either mimic or contrast with the parental role models. Then we have got the family life as well. We may be blessed with a rich family life or relatively poor family life. Our own friend's life could be adventurous type of friendship circle or circumspect and secure way of friend's life. So if you are having a poor family life, not so advantageous, fortunately or unfortunately, then you tend to be thrifty and extravagant either way. Having experienced poverty, you may say that my goal is to become highly materialistic and whatever I get, I'll keep myself happy. That could also be your way of looking at the issue of poverty versus richness. Someone who has grown in a rich background may again develop to be an extravagant person or a thrifty person. Having seen how richness is built, the person may become a thrifty person as well. So it's very difficult to say. Similarly, people who work with adventurous friends through their school and college lives again could become adventurous or have circumspect way of behaving, and vice versa. So which means that depending upon how a family is positioned and how the friend circle is positioned, we as participants of such family life and such a friend's life could have different ways of developing ourselves on the dimension of instincts. So the instinct for security for several individuals is a golden mean of the several basic instincts of survival and growth. At a basic level, fear triggers the instinct for survival while greed triggers the instinct for growth. These are of course the blunt statements, but the truth is certainly there in this extreme approach. So the human mind constantly weighs the available life options instinctively by trading off the perceived or experienced result of one intrinsic behavior over the other. Let's see this person jumping over a cliff. The instinct for survival emerges when he is hounded, let's say, by a wild animal. So the instinct gets the better of his wisdom, and also instinct makes him do certain things which are considered impossible. So in spite of the chasm which separates these two rocks, he would be positioned and equipped to jump over, and that is the instinct pushing him to a survival. On the other hand, there could be a herd instinct. While it was not entirely logical and rational, when lockdown was imposed, there was a huge movement of migrant laborers. It was really a herd instinct. It was based on the fact that many people are moving, so I also should move. And they did it over hundreds of kilometers, despite that being non rational, despite that being oblivious of the several entities being made by the state governments as well as the central government, that no, you must be in one place, we will take care of you. So this is the instinct that happens either through individual survival instinct or through herd community instinct. So the leadership analogy for that is as follows. A leader who is facing a corporate crisis may not balk from taking extreme measures if only such measures were to save his or her business. So if you are having a deep downfall in the performance, and the only way in which you could do is to commit double the level of investment despite the serious situation, but it has got 50% chance of success, you do that because you are pushed for survival. The instinctive response is often moderated or amplified by the conflict and collaboration within oneself. There is also rationality which works and tells us whether this instinctive behavior as leader is the right one or the not so right one. The conditioning influence on the intrinsic instincts of an individual comes through the bar one sets on each of these instincts. As one pursues a leadership journey, one hones the ability to play upon those instincts, whether it is the instinct for survival, which gets shadowed or overridden by the instinct for growth, or vice versa. So when faced with major challenges, the leadership challenge is to determine the balance between surviving versus thriving. How to manage and how to balance these two instincts of surviving and thriving, which goes on a roller coaster until one attains the age and maturity to settle for the golden mean of growth with stability or sustainable growth. That's why we discussed in the past that growth cannot be pursued as a singular objective. We should pursue sustainable growth. The moment you have an objective like that set in the vision statement, you also understand how to balance your instinctive behaviors with your experiential learnings as well as educational inputs to be able to take the company forward on a path of growth, but without upsetting the survival parameters through adventure means. That is the instinct logic trade-off which a leader must be aware of. Then let's come to intuition. It is actually a natural human characteristic. It is a blessing one receives in a differentiated manner from the Creator. Let's have you have an option to join 5 IITs and 4 NITs. You would have several reasons why you should join one or the other. Everything will have a merit. One IIT would have offered you a better course. One IIT could be closer or could also represent the hometown IIT. You may get the best possible discipline in one NIT. You may find that the course fees are lower in one NIT versus an IIT. So there are several factors which could analytically influence you take a particular decision. However, intuitively you feel that joining here probably is the best thing for me. Taking this course in this institution is probably the best one. And that is the intuitive feel you have. At a young age, you may not be able to explain this intuitive behavior, but at a leadership level, you tend to explain this intuitive behavior very well. And it is a neuroscience as well. You can do your own brain mapping through digital means and find out whether people who have intuitive approach, people who have instinctive behavior are different from those people who do not have intuition and instinct in a dominating way. But relative to mapping instinctive behavior, mapping intuitive behavior has somewhat become beyond clinical analysis, because intuition is something which is multi-layered. It is hidden deep in your emotions. It is not available to all, and it doesn't come for use at all times in all circumstances. So therefore some philosophical questions as well. What is intuition? Is it available to all, or only a few are blessed to have? The hypothesis is that despite some empirical or scientific basis of disciplines such as astrology and numerology, the relatively successful leaders in these domains make successful predictions about their intuition. We can call them the business astrologers or the business forecasters. People may have different frameworks for business 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, but a business astrologer who also happens to be the business leader is able to intuitively pick one option in a manner that is quite different from the way in which a highly trained, conceptually strong person would be able to do. That's intuition in a leader. How can we make intuition strong? In some leaders, intuition is powerful enough to override data and logic. I talked about J.R.D. Tata's intuition when 15 to 20 years ahead of the need for indigenous development of press metal parts, he made Tata Motors Telco at that time to invest in a press metal fabrication facility or press metal and die and tool making facility. That is the upregulated intuition which exists in an individual. In case of several individuals, their intuition tends to be weak and it tends to get overridden by data and logic. Many times when you see a particular stock movement in stock markets, for those people who watch stock markets, intuitively they feel that this is the time to sell. But there will be data analysis, investor reports, analyst reports, which tell you that no, you should not do that. So the intuition of a person gets downregulated by data and logic inputs that become available. This is true in leadership as much as in individual behavior. Data plus logic plus instinct, however, cannot together substitute intuition. I talked about Tata Ace example and Ravikant's intuition that this could be a new bestseller for Tata Motors. That is intuition. Given this background, when knowledge, experience, instinct and intuition are aligned and are combined, a winning combination emerges for the individual. Such leaders tend to take winning decisions which are seen as insightful and impactful, highly differentiated from the decisions which other leaders could take, and this occurs over and over again because they have the combination of education, experience, instinct and intuition in a very synergistic balance in them. Highly intuitive individuals may be persuaded by themselves or others to consider various factors, but the intuition is so strong that they would simply refuse to go away. At times, we may feel that a leader's assiduous work towards a challenging goal is driven by his or her willpower. But what drives such a leader is not necessarily his willpower, but the conviction which comes from the intuition he has. So we cannot see the intuition which is driving him. We will see the leader as a highly committed, highly dedicated, highly strong, highly passionate individual. But there is an intuition in him to say that, yes, you must do this. Let's say we have a startup company which has developed a smartwatch and it is capable of doing a few things. And the starting premise for that smartwatch is that I do away with the need for having two bands. There is one watch band and one health band. However, having done that, when the COVID-19 pandemic struck, he intuitively feels that I should move away from this and provide another apparatus for measuring the oxygen saturation levels. But that is because that is the one which is going to be there with the population for the next 3 to 4 years. So instinctively, that may not be the right one because you have tried to do something on the fly. Logically, it is not the right one because it upturns the startup foundation that helped have a combined smartwatch. But intuitively, the startup founder has taken a decision which helps him diversify his product portfolio and go into something which could have 3 to 5 years medium term business potential. So that intuition again is not premonition. Premonition is that feeling that something eerie is going to happen or something great is going to happen. That is completely random, and it is a bizarre and surprising way of thinking, premonition. On the other hand, intuition is a superordinate logic which comes from the deep inner self, almost like a God's blessings. That's extremely important to realize. And whenever we take an intuitive decision, we need to recognize that and understand that we have some measure of intuition within ourselves and learn to use the intuition as and when we are faced with difficult circumstances and difficult challenges. So how do we enhance organizational value? We have to deploy education so that we constantly learn new knowledge and gain new insights, especially relating to science and technology. And education is the only source for that. We must also understand the practical deployment of science and technology and also how practical issues enrich our science and technology, at times challenge science and technology, and only experience can help us. We need to change our method of response based on our instinct. We should understand, control, and where appropriate, positively use our basic instincts. And we should also overcome the internally existent barriers and externally provided inhibitors by discovering our intuition. This is the way in which a leader can enhance the organizational value. When you look at Microsoft Xbox, when the company was nothing but a desk operating system company, you can see all these 4 factors getting applied in a great measure. When the original Walkman was developed, it is an intuition by the founders that this is the one which is going to lead to a revolution in music field. Similarly, Apple iPod, another 4-factor combination of these matters. Then Google Android OS, again another intuitive development. WhatsApp, Tata 4Knots LCV like Tata Ace were intuitive, instinctive, educational and experienced learnings which were brought into the strategy of Tata Motors. Instincts work under pressures of external and internal environmental systems, but intuition almost entirely works in a vacuum. That is, it has an empty space of the future, but it does more than visualization and imagination to push a person to take that opportunity or avoid that risk. So let's compare the instinctive and intuitive behaviors, because we need to try to quantify this or make it more certain. It is nice to listen about instinctive behavior and intuitive behavior, but we must have models explaining that to be able to implement in our practice. So when the leader of an automobile firm decides to recall millions of cars because of some problem experienced in the field, it is a reputational instinct. He instinctively knows that if I don't recall, the reputation of the firm as the quality leader would be affected. Almost instinctively he decides, although it may cost several millions of dollars and there could be alternative viewpoints as to how to deal with this situation, the leader may instinctively take the decision. However, when the same automobile leader or a different automobile leader innovates with a hybrid car or solar car, despite market uncertainty, it is a visionary intuition that yes, there is abundant free energy available in the external environment we should utilize, and it will be a seller in spite of the technological barriers we exist. Is an intuitive behavior. When the leader of a large company decides to collaborate with a large or small company, it is a mirroring instinct. If you are a large company, you could like a large company for certain reasons of ego or equity in the relationship, or you would like to dominate a small company, or you feel excited by the agility of a small company. So it's a kind of mirror instinct that prompts you instinctively to tie up with another company. However, when the leader of a large company decides to bet on a startup innovator whose idea is fuzzy and in whom you see probably only passion and dedication, it's an intuitive perspective. When the leader of a cash surplus company cuts down capex when faced with recession so that further cash deployment is conserved, it's a safety instinct. However, when the leader of the similar company boosts capex despite recession so that the company is ready for growth upon recovery, it is an intuitive bet on revival. When the fund manager community sells off equity to invest in gold, it's a head instinct. On the other hand, when one fund manager stock picks, even amidst the uncertainty, it is an intuitive bet on human resilience. It is not on the stock, it is a bet on the human resilience. When the stock market collapsed by thousands of points post pandemic, instinctively everybody sells, but intuitively a few people buy. And the instinctive people protect themselves, whereas the intuitive people bet on human resilience or corporate resilience to come back. So that is the difference between instinctive behavior and intuitive behavior. The leader usually undergoes a four-step process before he or she can skillfully integrate these four essentials of education and experience as well as instinct and intuition for the right kind of decisions which need to be taken. So this is again the intersecting circle concept which we discussed earlier as well. Education, instinct, experience and intuition. The part of intersection must be as large as possible. Firstly, the knowledge input comes. Then it is quickly followed by experiential wisdom. In parallel, we keep getting a host of contextual instincts, and somewhere the intuition pops up saying that we need to do this. For this model to be effective, the intuition must be as quick and as spontaneous as instinct. Then only this model of education, experience, instinct and intuition would work very well. There will be many decisions, but only few will be the real start decisions combining all the four essentials. It could be educated guess based on the knowledge you have. It could be an experiential direction based on the experience you have gained. It could be an instinctive leap or a freeze depending on the instinct you have. But it could be an intuitive move based on the intuition you have. So the mechanics and dynamics of the interaction of the above four characteristics of a leader personality must be best understood first by the leader himself or herself, so that the best decisions are taken under every circumstance. So the process mix obviously varies depending upon the factors of production or the factors of cooperation that we deal with. Let's take four distinct decision domains: business, people, resources and regulation. We also have these four drivers of leadership behavior and leadership decision and effectiveness: education, experience, instinct and intuition. As far as business is concerned, the leader's education plays a big role because business is all but knowledge and options. Similarly, experience also plays a big role because you have learned further as to the right options to be adopted and the right competitiveness mix which you can derive. But there would be also instinct, which will be tapered down by logic, because as an educated, experienced leader handling a business, you are taught to use rationality and logic, objectivity and analytics to be able to take the right decisions. Instinct is tapered down. However, intuition plays a major role when you think of the business 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. To be able to envision and move into the future, you require a fair measure of intuition to imagine the future mega trends and take the company towards that goal. Let's say people. The leader's education has low impact because it is the soft skill capability of the leader that would impact the people. Experience of dealing with people has medium impact. However, the instinct, it could work two ways. An extroverted leader may work with introverted people or vice versa. Generally, leaders tend to rely on instinctively similar people. Aggressive leader wants aggressive people to work so that the team aggression quotient is higher. Intuition is completely different. Great leaders do not see how we work with our teams. Great leaders intuitively select the right people for the teams. That's the big difference intuition makes to the people selection process or people management process in an organization. Let's look at resources. Knowledge of science, technology, geopolitical economics is very important, which comes from education. And these leadership decisions are reinforced by experience in an individual. But instinctively, people make certain decisions based on the use and deployment of resources. People with bold instincts make either adventurous investments or at times very winning investments. That is instinct driven. Intuition helps in resource deployment in a different way. Certain futuristic activities such as circular economy or sustainability are better guided by intuition rather than by instinct. Then when we come to regulation, education plays a very good role because well informed is usually well prepared. Not knowing the law is never an excuse or an alibi. So you have to understand the circumstances and the regulations that determine our company's success or failure is important. Experience, the stature that comes with experience enables better interactions with regulators. Instinct clouds our judgment regarding regulatory changes. There was this example of an automobile company when axle loads were upgraded by 25%. The experienced leader said that it doesn't matter because we have so much of extra load carrying requirement in the economy that whether you increase it by 25% or 50%, it doesn't matter to my demand situation. But that was an instinctive, aggressive, I do not bother so much about the regulatory dynamics approach. However, intuitively, another leader would think that when 25% of extra payload is built into my standard vehicle design, what would happen to that 25% payload in the economy? It just disappears because they would still need vehicles, but vehicles are already taking 25% extra load. So the demand could probably come down, if not by 25%, maybe 10%, by 50%. So intuition helps in terms of business decisions related to regulatory changes. The moment regulatory change is coming in, an intuitive leader is able to spot the impact, feel the impact immediately. Similarly, when people take safety walks, an intuitive leader makes better decisions on unsafe acts than an instinctive leader or an experienced leader on education, because safety is a consideration of behavior and behavior is best felt intuitively in respect of future behaviors of individuals. So different domains and different contexts certainly require different aspects of leadership components such as these to work together, and also in a differentiated mix on a case-by-case basis. The leader therefore needs to calibrate this process, the domain and the four factors. How do they combine to make a winning combination? So let's synthesize the four leadership essentials. Let's first understand that each leadership essential has continuous relevance in leadership development and leadership effectiveness all through the active life phases of a leader. We can never say that education is less important. We can never say that experience is more important or less important. We cannot ignore our instinct. We cannot fail to discover our latent intuition. All are important. So we need to have processes and components at our hand for leadership development and leadership effectiveness in terms of these four. So educative faculties help us to chart a growth plan, to upskill the organization and learn few things and new ways of doing things. It helps us move out of our comfort zone. Experiential faculties, they progressively get ingrained in our DNA. They provide us with the strength, wisdom and stature to be a leader. Experiential learning should never be stopped by any individual, more so a leader. Instinctive faculties are also important. When surprising developments come our way, we need to be instinctive. It could be conditioning, it could be collaborating, but such approach must come instinctively so that we are able to respond without loss of time. We also must recognize that intuitive faculties are called upon to play when certain critical decisions of a future state are made. It could be selection of a different type of a leader, selection of an untested technology, or development of a novel product. Selection of a leader to succeed could be made by intuition. There is a case of a great group in India which made the selection based on nexus, based on familiarity, but it was a wrong decision, and had intuition been applied, probably a better decision would have come about. We'll discuss some of these aspects in the lecture on leadership transitions. Similarly, using an untested technology, taking up a research topic, or developing a novel product could all be propelled by intuition to the realms of proper achievement. These four elemental processes, once in place, will stay with the leader. They are not the ones which will desert a leader, but the leader must make also conscious effort to keep developing on the path of these four factors. He should be as aware and respectful of these four elements of a good leadership process. So how do we integrate these four essentials? I will repeat this again. Education inculcates more than knowledge, learning approach. Experience enhances our wisdom and builds stature. As we accumulate our failures and successes, we become wiser, and that builds our stature. Instincts help us balance the risk and reward. It is not just about meeting the risk or pursuing reward. We should know how to balance our instincts so that our risk reward balance of the organization is also preserved. And the intuition, it gives us a unique feel for a niche in an uncertain or unknown future. We should be able to tap our intuition. There is a core purpose for each of these four factors, but when we are able to have an alchemy of these four, we will pack a powerful leadership punch, which not many other leaders would be able to pack. So you can see people who have excelled in their fields out of various dimensions. Knowledge leadership, Dr. Homi Bhabha, who built India's atomic energy capability. He was a great knowledge leader. He had the expertise in atomic energy development. He was instinctively predisposed towards national security and national self-reliance. He was also intuitively believing that atomic energy is the future support for India's many civil and nuclear requirements. So it is a combination of these four factors. Similarly, Vikram Sarabhai, the father of India's space program, he was predominantly, again, like Homi Bhabha, driven by the knowledge dimension. But all the other three dimensions were present in good measures. Sir C.V. Raman, Nobel laureate and father of Indian science, and Sir M. Visvesvaraya, the architect of modern Indian engineering. They were academically brilliant and practically astute engineers and scientists who built great institutions in India because of their leadership capabilities. And they had these four factors in their leadership personality to be able to make these lasting foundational contributions to what India is today. Similarly, globally, we have Bill Gates, who has moved from software to healthcare. It was an intuitive call. I wouldn't say that it was an instinctive call. It was an intuitive call to move away from software development at Microsoft to healthcare in Gates Foundation. Jack Welch, he moved from industry to academics. He thought his ability to communicate, his ability to convey a point of view in leadership and management is the best way he could connect and remain connected with huge population base in management and leadership. Muhammad Yunus, he moved away from professorship to microfinance. He created the world's first microfinance movement in an organized sector, and actually he made a immense difference to how rural and indigent families are supported. V. Krishnamurthy, he became the father of modern public enterprise because he knew how to combine the merits of public ownership and private enterprise and create lasting institutions of legacy in manufacturing and infrastructure. So there are several examples of how these leaders build their institutions. These leaders were knowledge seeking, experience building, instinctive and intuitive. So this four-factor framework is extremely important for leadership effectiveness. Then finally we come to our icon of leaders, the people's president, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. He was a noted defense scientist who came to the level he achieved through sheer self-development. He wrote many books. He is considered the father of India's missile program. Simple, humble and ethical to the core, he took a special interest in inspiring students and nurturing educational ecosystem. He was a knowledge-driven individual. In fact, the 8 examples I mentioned earlier and this example of Dr. Abdul Kalam, the people's president, tell us that it is the knowledge which is the starting point of our leadership journey. Knowledge either through formal education or through informal education, it has to be the fountainhead of our leadership capability. and knowledge, when we equate with talent, is also the driving force. Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam has this famous saying, all of us do not have equal talent, but all of us have an equal opportunity to develop our talents. And it is more relevant in today's digital age. We need to make use of every learning platform that is available, consistent with the time we have and the aspirations we have, to be able to develop ourselves on the knowledge and talent dimension continuously. Quite appropriately, after his presidency, he returned to his civilian life of education, writing, and public service. So we will revert to Dr. Abdul Kalam's leadership insights and leadership model at a later stage in our discussion. But suffice it to say that a highly knowledgeable, highly experienced person with very positive instincts towards life and an intuitive feel for the importance of education and children in the building of a modern India reflects for us the beauty, the novelty, and the importance of the four-factor leadership framework which we discussed, that is education, experience, instinct, and intuition, occurring in a synergistic alchemy. Thank you. We will meet in the next lecture.